Welcome to Freed on Business. He grew up in South Florida, has been in business here since the early 90s, and has closed over $3 billion in deals. He's seen it all. He always has an opinion, and he's always ready to share it. Informed, entertaining, and connected, he has his finger on the pulse of South Florida's business community. He's Jim Freed, and this is Freed on Business.
Well, it's that time of the year again where we're doing our interviews for the Miami Book Fair. The Miami Book Fair is the November 17th to the 24th this year. We want to thank, as always, Lisa Paley for bringing us our guests. And we have a repeat guest, old friend of mine from when our days at UF, Mr. James Grippando. Mr. Mendoza, there you go. Mr. Grippando, thank you so much for joining us again, James. The book is The Goodbye Girl. I'm going to try to get it in there. There it is. Tremendous story, a tremendous read. I personally can connect on many levels with this. Suffice it to say, I watched it this year. I'm reading it this year, sitting on my balcony overlooking the Venetian Islands and the Port of Miami. James, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here and glad to talk to you about the book fair. This will be my 30th, Jim. So believe that or not.
Wow. Well, listen, I know what you invest in our community. You're a professor at UM. I think in both the law sphere and in the literary sphere, and we're obviously going to dive more into the literary sphere if I can ever get it out of my mouth again. My gosh. So I wouldn't really get right to it. I first met you at UF. You were a student, law student, became a lawyer. What made you transition from being a lawyer to being a lawyer/author?
Well, I think the distinction was that my goal was to become a lawyer, but the dream in the back of my head was always to be a writer. And I had suppressed that dream a little bit until, you may recall, shows in the late 80s and early 90s, like, oh gosh, go all the way back to LA Law. And then along came Law and Order, which is still on the air, you know, and either arrogantly or naively, I kind of looked at those shows and said, well, you know, I can do that, you know, and I spent nights and weekends while working for a large Miami law firm writing a first novel that never got published, by the way. It's still sitting on the shelf. But in 1994, my first book, called The Pardon, was published in September of 94. So we are literally on the 30th anniversary of the publication of that book and the 30th anniversary of my first appearance at Miami Book Fair.
Now, I shorted you on your introduction because I was so excited to speak with you. You're the New York Times bestselling author. I know that's not easy. And you're the winner of the Harper Lee Prize for Legal Fiction. And I got to tell you, I can really relate to your main character in the book for many different reasons. They're all personal, so we don't need to get into them today. Let's pretend that we're sitting in your class at the University of Miami, your literary class. First day, everybody says hello. You get your syllabuses handed out, or syllabi. And what's the first thing you tell your students?
Well, first thing I tell them is, I want to find out if anybody is there who has the same dream I do of writing. And then I'm going to ask them, okay, so what are you reading right now? Right? And oftentimes I will get a response such as, oh gosh, I'm in law school. You know, I'm too busy to read. And I can kind of like tick off right there. Okay, that one's not going to be a writer. That one's not going to be a writer. But if somebody tells me they are actually still finding time to read for pleasure while going through law school, I say, you got what it takes. Because to become a writer, you've got to be a reader. And I tell that to my law school students, and I also tell it to, you know, third graders when I go speak at elementary schools about writing and books. It will just remain true till the end of time.
Without a doubt. I mean, you made me get goosebumps when you said that, because I'm not a writer. I do this, I do other things. I'm, you know, but I was telling Mr. Mendoza before we got on the air that I thought of so many different things to talk about, different ways to describe things, and it just electrified me just reading it in such a self-actualizing way. It was truly inspiring to watch the way that you turned a phrase, described something that's everyday to me, and made it so that somebody anywhere could feel it and understand it. What do you find to be the inspiration that you get for your plots? It seems like I'm going to sound like the back of your book cover, maybe grabbed from the headlines. I can see what you're doing, and I feel it, and it's fictionalized, but it also has a dual path for me where I'm connecting it to a touchstone in the analog world, I guess is what I'd call it.
Sure. Yeah. And sometimes I think that you can put the books, and there are now 31 of them, right? So yeah, Goodbye Girl is my 31st novel. And so I think you can kind of put the ideas in two buckets, right? One is, it really does happen that sometimes you get that lightning bolt, you're struck with an idea. And that happened with my first novel. I had a near arrest involving an incident I had nothing to do with. And so I kind of took this feeling of being innocent and yet possibly accused of something, and wrote about that feeling, and wrote of course, you take it to the most dramatic extreme possible. That became The Pardon, the story of an innocent man on death row who's about to be executed for a crime he didn't commit. But other times it's like the percolator, right? And there's an idea for a story, and then sort of just for years it might percolate around in your head until it's time to write it. That was the case with Goodbye Girl, because it was this idea, even though the book was just published in 2024, the idea for the story first started in like 2012.
So was I got to just ask, being now a fan of yours, was that first book about Theo?
So the first book does not. So the question about Theo, for listeners who haven't read the books, there's Jack Switek is a criminal defense lawyer, and he has this sidekick, Theo, which kind of creates a sort of a buddy character that people just love, because Theo is the only innocent man that Jack ever defended on death row. And of course, he lives his life the way you would if you spent 4 years on death row for a crime you didn't commit. And, and that is, anything worth doing is worth overdoing is kind of his philosophy in life. And so people really connect to him. But no, Theo is not in that first in the series, which The Pardon is. And then I left Jack Switek alone for like 8 years after I wrote The Pardon, and didn't come back to him until 2002. And now there are 18 in the series, and Goodbye Girl is the 18th Jack Switek series in this Jack Switek novel in the series. And as even though you're only halfway through it, Jim, that Theo plays a very prominent role, not only in this latest book, but also in basically the entire series, except that very first story.
I love his Uncle Si.
Yeah, Uncle Si was an inspiration that came to me. So Uncle Si is raised Theo, but he was also a jazz musician back in the old days, of Overtown, when Overtown was considered sort of, the Miami's Little Harlem, right? And so he captures a bygone era of a little bit of nostalgia there, but also some sadness, because what killed Overtown was just I-95 and 395 intersection really went through the heart of Overtown and everything that it had built up over the years and went away. And I think it's important. I love writing about those things, and little pieces of Miami that are worth preserving. I like incorporating that into the plot, so that Miami is really more than a setting in my books. It's almost a character in itself.
Without a doubt. And just as a tangent, I've always found that people ask me about what's a historic building in Miami, and I'm typically going to say a picture, because it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
How do you do your character development? I've really noticed the Jack and his now wife in this book evolving throughout your series. How do you create the timeline or the character development line from book to book?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's a threshold question you have to answer when you start a series. Is that character going to stay frozen in time and 30 something forever, or is he or she going to age in real time? And Jack, I wouldn't say ages in real time. He's not 30 years older than he was when he appeared in The Pardon, but people really do enjoy following the character. So he started out, fortunately for me, he started out as a 20-something-year-old ideologue, back in 1994, and then Theo becomes his buddy, and then he meets the love of his life in Andy Henning, who has some inherent issues because she's an FBI agent. So you've got the FBI agent married to a criminal defense lawyer, which makes the sparks fly now and then. And now they have a child, and people really do like to watch that evolution of a character. And I'm very glad I made that decision, not to keep him, James Bond and fabulous forever, but to age him over time, everybody, people who talking about Miami Book Fair, I can remember going to see John Updike, watching that Rabbit series, right? How that evolved. That was, so that things like that are in my head. I'm no John Updike, but still, those are it's the same sort of consideration that keeps readers coming back. Okay, what's the next phase in life until I think the last book in that series was Rabbit at Rest, right? I don't know if we'll get to Jack Switek at rest, but
please don't put him out to pasture yet. I'm loving this. I want to remind everybody we're with there it is. We're with James Grippando. Oh my gosh. Anyway, James Grippando, the Goodbye Girl. I want to thank the Miami Book Fair and Lisa Payton for bringing Mr. Grippando again to our show. Maybe we can make it an annual event. I'm going to read some great books.
Love that. I keep writing a book a year.
Well, then we got a date. Stick with us. We're going to have the bottom line and a great takeaway from James when we come right back. Stick with us. Mr. Mendoza, show James the setting of his stories. All right, everybody. We just saw Miami. Another icon of Miami is Warren Henry. I want to thank our friends at Warren Henry for a decade plus of sponsorship. I'm getting all the congratulations. We've now been on the air for 15 years. Warren Henry's been our sponsor for, at least 12 or 13 of those years. Thank you to Larry, Eric, Isbit, and the rest of the team at Warren Henry. Remember, if you're looking to buy or lease a car, you want to get every advantage you can. That's why you check out Warren Henry up in Gainesville. They've got Audis down in the Keys. They've got everything. And here at 151st and Biscayne, they sell Land Rover, Range Rover, Infiniti, Jaguar, and now Lincoln. Remember, always the best price, always the best service. Join me, my friends, my beautiful wife, Vivian, and my mom. Always Warren Henry. See that, James? Mr. Mendoza didn't even read the book yet, and look what he did.
It's not easy to describe how beautiful Miami is.
So, you've been going to the book fair for 30 years as a speaker. I'm sure before that as a participant and as a listener. What's your favorite story from your attendance at the Miami Book Fair?
Oh boy, this is really going to take you back. Okay, I think this must have been somewhere in the early 90s, before I was an author. And I can remember going to see Garrison Keillor at performing. And, you know, he had the NPR radio show for years and years. By his own admission, couldn't really sing, but that didn't stop him. And he did a rendition that had the crowd on its feet to the tune of Oklahoma. And we all sang Miami Book Fair, okay.
Great. That's great. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody at the Miami Book Fair. I remember James Grippando, award-winning author, New York Times bestseller, Harper Lee Prize for legal literature, page turner. You can't. I couldn't put it down. I saw my whole life while I was turning the pages of the book. I want to thank Lisa Paley, as always, serving up these great authors. The Miami Book Fair is November 17th to the 24th. Make sure you go out and hear Mr. Grippando speak. I know I'll be there. And Jimmy, if your mom was listening, I can't wait to see you again and to have you again next year and to do my favorite Jack Switek. I can't wait to see what you're going to have them do next. So thank you so much for bringing Miami to the forefront and making Miami one of your characters in this book. Thank you again so much.
You bet. Anytime, Jim.
Oh, I want to thank our good friend Lisa Paley for bringing us another great author from the Miami Book Fair. Remember, the Miami Book Fair is November 17th to the 24th. I also want to thank our sponsors, Warren Henry Automotive. They've been with the show for 12, 13 years. It's great to be part of the Warren Henry family. You should be too. Always the best price, always the best service, always Warren Henry. And I want to thank our other sponsors, the University of Florida Center for Real Estate Studies, the Bergstrom Center. And I want to remind you, we drop a new podcast every Wednesday at noon. Join us for more great authors and more great topics. And remember, a person wants to do something, finds a way. The other finds an excuse. Now go out there and make it happen. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Mr. Mendoza, the rest of the show is yours.